Yeah, I knew him because when I was a teenager, he lived, well, he lived in the center of Ganawaga on the main
Mm.
highway.
Oh, okay.
And my brother and I were going to play lacrosse. We weren't in juniors yet, and
Mhm.
he called us over. We were waiting for our bus, and he says, "Where are you going?" I said, "We're going to, I don't know, it's someplace in Montreal." And
Mhm.
he was a heavy set man, and he had dark rimmed glasses. I could see him sitting there right now.
Hmm.
He says, "You guys will never be lacrosse players until you go over the mountain." I says, "Where's over the mountain?" He said, "British Columbia." He said, "I was there. I played there." And I went over the mountain 3 times to play there. So I always remember Osler. Because when I got home, I said to my dad, "Uncle Tiga." He says, "Oh, Osler Jacobs." And he says, he was a famous lacrosse player. I said, "Oh, well, I didn't know." And,
Wow.
but, as an elder, he didn't look like a lacrosse player because everybody's not in shape anymore. Like he was
R-
an old man.
Right.
And so every time I went over the mountain, I come back and I stopped by and he was still alive. The first time I went over and I said, "Osler, my brother and I went over the mountain," and he just started to laugh and he says, "Okay, then you're lacrosse players." And I don't remember him when he died. I don't remember because it wasn't long after I went to New York City to work steelwork, and he may have died sometime in between, you know,
Mhm.
because you come home on a weekend and you pretty well don't know who passed or whatever.
Mhm.
But as soon as you said Osler Jacobs, I knew him, man.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That is information I did not have. And my father died in 1978.
Okay. Well, then
Yeah,
I was in New York City.
and I only got a chance to talk with my uncle, Lloyd. Lloyd
Yeah,
was
yeah.
still alive.
Okay. Now you mentioned Lloyd. Okay, I knew
Oh,
Lloyd. Good. Yeah, yeah. All right. It's a small world.
well, it's a homecoming, don't you know? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, this is great stuff because there's so many gaps. And over the years, I've been trying off and on to fill in those gaps as best I can. And so you've been you don't know how wonderful it is to know even that little bit of information because that's part of me.
Hmm.
And my grandparents, Alice and Paul, I do know my grandmother was kind of famous on the reserve for her lemon meringue pie. And she was a great beater, as a matter of fact, and she made jewelry.
Okay.
And my grandfather, Paul, he and
She froze. You froze.
Yeah, it looks like you froze, Susan.
Cass Corridor. And I found out that at the same time, my grandparents and my father were living in that same neighborhood. So we could have passed ourselves on the street and we wouldn't know it. My mother, Lillian Mashike, was also living in that neighborhood, and I didn't know that she was there. So it's almost, scientists call that 3 degrees of separation. And that's precisely what um, my life and my life's history has been. Just around the corner, and you don't even know who exists around the corner until maybe much later, or you may not even find out. Uh, when I came here to California in 1969, um, I got involved with the Indian community. Of course, it was right after Alcatraz, And I got to go to school at UC Berkeley with the Alcatraz vets. So I got to know the people on a different kind of level. And I found out that my brother was also in California at the same time. I didn't even know where he was or anything, but he was there. Fast forward about, I guess, 15 years ago, I was at DQ. I was a board member 3 times, and we were in a board meeting. One time, a young man came in. He introduced himself as Philip Mashike, and my jaw dropped. And he made his presentation, and then I ran after him after he left the room, and I introduced myself as his aunt. And he and I didn't know we existed. The family kept all of that secret, but Creator said, you can't go back home right now, but we're going to bring home to you. So that to me was a miracle. And so we've been trying to get a family relationship ever since. Right now, just a month ago, my great niece gave birth, so I'm a great aunt at this point. So things just keep rolling along unexpectedly. We all have unexpected surprises to fill in those gaps that we so desperately need. So it's a healing for me to even hear this information. So I want to thank you. Miigwech to you.
Okay, well, again, right after my junior years, I married into the Jacobs family.
Oh no!
Ernie Jacobs. That was my father-in-law. And so the world is starting to get small.
There's Steve.
That's right. Great, wonderful. Well, it's boy, you don't know how wonderful it is to fill in those gaps. I never thought I would be able to fill in. It means the world to me. It truly does. Thank you.
Hey, Mike. Thank you, Susan. Hey, Mike, I see you're up and running now.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're basically just kind of doing a short introduction of ourselves to each other before we get started. So if you don't mind, Mike, could you kind of introduce yourself and tell everybody a little about who Mike Bastine is?
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me. And I started this path close to 50 years ago. But my dad didn't know his lineage. And he came from a time when it was shameful to admit to be Native. And so he was taken from his mom, and that carried through with most of his life, that we would ask and he didn't know. So in the mid to late 60s, we ended up going back up to Maniwaki, Quebec, and that's where his mom was from. So my grandmother, her name was Maud Tenesco, and William Commanda, he recognized my dad and he knew his mom. So that was quite a ways back, probably 60 some years ago. And I never heard any of the teachings from the Native culture. And as I got into my early 20s, I had a Cherokee lady that I worked with, an older woman. She asked me if I knew any of my background. I said, no. She says, well, you know, we're a part of this church. She says, I really like you to go there. So it's called Pentecostal. And I didn't know anything about it, but I went there with her. And when my dad found out, he wasn't happy. So he ended up handing me a book called Rolling Thunder. And I read the book and I said, this is exactly what I've been looking for. But you don't know what you're looking for until you hear these concepts and these teachings. And so I went back to the church one more time and I told the pastor I was reading this book called Rolling Thunder, and his response was, it sounds satanic to me. So I never went back, and I met Mad Bear through that pathway. And when I heard more of Mad Bear's conversation and talking about the concepts and the teachings of the original instructions of the Haudenosaunee, it had such an impact on me that I knew that those were the teachings which resonated. Those were the teachings that fit. As soon as you'd walk outside, you'd acknowledge this creation as this is the element that we need to honor and live with. So that was my path. It started way back then. And there's a lot of little things you learn along the way that it's not a problem, but it was for some of the other people, some of the Haudenosaunee, the Seneca people. They didn't care for Mad Bear too much because he'd call them out when they weren't following the proper procedures with the teachings of the Haudenosaunee, and then they used to tell him, you're kind of an outsider, but he said you can call me that if you want, but I know your teachings and your doctrine as well, if not better than you do. And he said, in the structure of the way you should be operating and honoring the clan mothers and the chiefs and using that system which was given to you. And when he'd call out someone that was corrupt, they didn't like that. So that was kind of one strike against me. So I would continue on and still traveled with Mad Bear and paid attention and did as much as I could, having exposure to and the teachings and the concepts of Haudenosaunee people. And so I, through that time, had met Ted Williams and several others, which Tom Porter, a number of good Haudenosaunee people that they helped along the way. So there's a lot of interesting things that seem to culminate and come into the life when you find out about the peacemaker and his journey and his coming to the Haudenosaunee, and you start to see that the peacemaker actually came from the land where my people reside, where they were from, and they rejected him. So he came across the waters here, the lakes, and he came to the Haudenosaunee, and they were receptive, and he helped them, and he left with them the teachings of how they can improve the way they were living life. So that's pretty much, I mean, how I've developed into where I am in life and how I accept and understand. I've seen so many things that Mad Bear did as a practitioner of the medicines that so much of it defies logic, and it defies the physics, the laws of physics. And when I saw things demonstrated, I knew that these life forces are real and they're to be used, and that Mad Bear had that ability, and he let me see things that you can't use logic to explain, and you can't use the laws of physics. So you know that there's another element, and if you want to refer to that as spirituality or the life force that exists in all of the creation, then that's what it is. So that's a little in a concise way of where I got to and how I got to this place of where I am. And it's an honor to be in the company of these people that you brought together.
Thanks, Mike. Mike, since you're the last to go for the introduction, I got a couple questions here. So maybe if you don't mind, if you want to start off the, answering the question. So for this one, I had, what is the most profound experience that you had with spirit? So if you can just explain your experience and define the context and how it changed your life. I feel like he did kind of touch on that a little bit already, but even if you want to go a little bit more detailed.
Sure. I guess the one that stands out the most was Mad Bear was giving a man, he was from Rochester, he was a cab driver, and Mad Bear was giving him a reading using a little cup with water and the sacred tobacco. And as he was going through the reading, there was a piece of tobacco that sank to the bottom of the cup. And Mad Bear noticed he had been there before, but he said, "You're wearing a ring that you've never had before." And the fella told him, he says, "Well, I had a fare that couldn't pay, so he gave me this ring to pay for his cab ride." Well, as Mad Bear looked in the cup, he said, "He not only shared with you that ring, but he shared with you all of the bad elements, the energy that was associated with it." Because the guy said to Mad Bear at one point, he said, "If I didn't have bad luck," he said, "I wouldn't have any luck at all." So Mad Bear told him, "Take the ring off and put it on the table." And he did. And Mad Bear went on with the reading, but he called me over and he said, "Do you know where the cedar is?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Grab a handful of the cedar and put it in that porcelain pan with some water and bring it to a boil." So I did. I brought it out to the table and I set it down, and Mad Bear, I was walking away and Mad Bear said, "No, no, no." He goes, "Come here." He says, "I want you to see this." And he picked the ring up, and as we're looking at the cup of the tobacco and water, and there's a piece of tobacco in the bottom of the cup. And as he picked that ring up and he was dipping it into that cedar water, that piece of tobacco went just like this. And it refloated and went back to the top. And I said, "You son of a gun." I said, "If I didn't see it," I said, "I don't know if I'd believe it." And he said, "Well," he says, "that's why these things are here." He said, "That cedar is the strongest medicine for taking care of things like that. And it's not just the smoke." So that's why when he boiled it and he made the liquid, because you see something like that and you try to logically make sense. How did that, it sunk to the bottom of the water in that cup. And I know the laws of physics would say you have to get that out and dry it out and it would float again. And logically, what I saw happen didn't make any sense. But when you observe everything, then you understand that the life force, the elements that are in that cedar are there for the benefit of all of us and everyone. And when that can cleanse and remove that kind of energy, those are things that you can't describe it unless you see it happen and saying, "Wow, that life force is real and it does work." And so that was probably, there were others, but that was probably the one that had the greatest impact to say, I witnessed something that you can't make sense out of it. Logically, you're just going, wow, how in the world did that work? How did it do it? But it just tells me that the life forces that are in existence, that are in those elements that we've been given to use to help us when we encounter things of that nature, that it does work, and it had that lasting impression. In fact, since that time, I've used that twice, two different times, and have the same results. I didn't do a reading, but when someone described to me what the problems they were having, and they were pieces of jewelry, and I said, we'll wash it in this cedar water. And she let me know that the next few days, she said, everything calmed down. She said there was no more of these encounters, which were holding on to those things, that elements that were creating such a disturbance in her life that she was going to throw the jewelry out. And I said, there's no need for that. I said, let's try this and see what happens. So, I mean, we did a smudge, and then we did that, and it cleared up all the issues that she had.
That's cool, Mike. Thanks for sharing that. I would have to imagine like being there, you telling us it sounds really cool, very interesting. The fact that it's sunk and then it rised again. But I would think that just having that first person experience and knowing Mad Bear and being right there to see it with your own eyes was just really, like a profound moment for you.
It's confirmation of the things that you have been told that are real, but until you witness something of that nature, it sounds nice to hear the stories, but when you actually see and witness an experience like that, then I knew. I go, it really is. It's the spiritual life force or element that was in the cedar and the tobacco, because they're working together and showing us this is what it's here for. And you can resolve almost any problem that you're encountering in this life.
Yeah. And I feel like there's so many people, Western mind people, scientifically educated people who will hear that story. And, the first thing they'll say, okay, well, what were the other variables at play? Like, was the ring dropped in? There'd be 1,000,001 different questions to deconstruct that experience that you had. But at the end of the day, the end result of what he did was something that was very positive. So, and you hear this often, you hear about these things that make absolutely no sense. And yet the end result is something that is very positive, that has the ability to help people when all other methods have failed. And that's something that just because you can't, scientifically, I guess, substantiate the fact that whatever happened, we found out the reason why it did. I think those types of people, those scientifically minded, Western minded people, are kind of missing the point that not everything needs to be, stuffed into that, into that box, that, the box of logic and science. I'm not saying by any means that there's not a real value to science and physics. There absolutely is. You see it everywhere you go, every day. But, you also have to take into consideration that there are some things that don't really make any sense, but are real, So that was awesome.
You're absolutely correct. And the other teaching, which comes from both sides, is when there's a challenge from, let's just say, the scientific or the mainstream community, and they want to see something demonstrated, Mad Bear would always tell them, this is not something that we play with to use as a demonstration. And he said, and if you're not of the right mind, he said, we wouldn't want you close by to interfere with the elements that don't work for people who have minds like that, which are just there to see it demonstrated like some kind of a show. And he would always make it clear, if you want to be in close to this and you want to see something, then we have to help prepare you before you can be in the proximity, in the closeness of that. Because he said it's almost dishonoring the sacred by bringing someone in from the outside just to show off, just to show them something. And he would always make that clear, that this is not a demonstration just for your benefit. This is something sacred that we hold so dear that it's our job, our responsibility to not only respect it, but to protect it, to not use it frivolously to just do a demonstration.
That's well said, Mike. Well said. See that is cedar. And that's why we use cedar when we go into a sweat lodge.
Mm-hmm.
We go in there and it's a rebirth. So like that, the tobacco leaf that rose, when we come out of the sweat lodge, we rise again. So we're that leaf that sunk. That's why we're a part of nature. We're people of the 5 nations, 6 nations now, but Garunda or Yerunda is our body. Garunda is part of, that's where the that means the flat leaf. And we're part of that tree. So we are part of the what you call it, of nature. We're not a part of like the God stuff. And by the way, I got kicked out of the Pentecostal church, so you and I are brothers. It's the best thing they ever did.
Well, to me, that was an honor. When I look back at it, it would be something wrong with me if they accepted me and want me to stay there. So,
well, I guess you have to take a line. You have to take a line from Groucho Marx. If anybody would, any club that would have me for a member, I wouldn't want to be a member of. It's there's a lot of comedy in our culture. Like I'm the last of the fluent speakers. And a lot of people don't want to talk to me because they got their canoe attached to the white man's boat.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in and out of the boat, and they don't know where to. They don't want to pick a side, so nobody can trust you. Now they're just like the white man, and the European. They're not all white,
Right?
But when nobody can trust you, you're like in the center line of a turnpike. You can get hit from both sides. Nobody wants you. You got to pick a side and stay in it, So I learn everything through our language,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Mad Bear used to use that same reference. He said that people would have 1 foot in the canoe and 1 foot in the boat. And he said, and when things would come to life, when they would start to part, he goes, where are you going to end up? He says, you got to stay in one or the other and do the best you can with each. But that's why even the 2-row wampum was the first instruction that said in the ribbon shirts that are made today, that the ribbons will never cross, that they run side by side. And there's not anything that says one side is the better or the other, the worse. And you're supposed to honor that parallel path to walk. This is the life. And it's demonstrated all the time in nature. that this is the harmonious teaching that the creation shows us, that they all work in a harmonious way, and there is never ones that group up to say, let's overtake that other side, let's show them the right way. They're both right ways. But when you start altering your thought and the mindset of abusing the earth for profit, for gain, then that's when the destruction, it begins. And then they think they own. No, we don't own that.
No.
That's a gift. No,
Well,
those were the greatest. Go ahead.
Many years ago, I did a sweat lodge for, there was actually, strangely enough, there was 13 French Canadian women. It's from between 20 to 25, and they want, so I made a sweat lodge. But it wasn't like, yeah, we're doing a sweat. I says, okay, I tell you what, I said, this is a big undertaking. It's not 15 minutes. I said, I live in the bush though. I said, I'll build a sweat lodge and I'll gather the wood. So in their Western mind, they said, well, how much does it cost? I says, I can't charge you nothing. I have no right to charge you anything. And they right away, they were like, something's wrong. Everybody's got a profit. I said, no. I said, the only thing I'm going to ask you, I says, is you go out and you get 4 or 5, maybe 6 round stones, almost like a bowling ball. I said, they can't be flat. They got to be round. That's where all the energy is. So so it took like 6 weeks. They were getting ready, and I just told they were all French Canadian, so one of them was their leader, and I said, just drop she knew where I lived. I said, just pile them by this pile of wood. And so as 6 weeks went by, I had a whole pile of stones, and they said, we'll do it this Friday. I says, okay. I says, I'm not by the phone, and there was no phones like today. I don't have one anyway, you know? So I said, I'll be outside, you show up, I'll be heating the stones. So I hung a hose out so they could take a shower, you know, because anyway, I started the fire and I was throwing the stones in and they were white hot. And so they showed up about 5 o'clock in the evening, and it gets dark about 9:30. They come in and I had all the cedar in there. I said, bring your water jugs and go in and don't try to outdo the other. When you can't handle it, come out. That's your body's telling you, you can only take so much. But anyway, we finished all that, and they came out, took their showers. Then we had like a talk, and they said, can we do it again next week? And I said, well, no. I said, it's going to take another 6 to 8 weeks. And I said, I've gathered all the dead wood I can, you know. I said, oh, okay. And we never had it again. But apparently through my friend Diane, she says they had one of the most wonderful experiences. And they said, what you did is you went back. I says, that's not just a sweat lodge. I said, you went back into your mother's womb. And when you came out, that it was like the first time you came onto the planet. I said that air hits you. You were reborn. It doesn't have no religious, no religious significance. I said you were reborn, so now you start over. And later on, we had talking circles with these same women, and they felt like their lives were changed. But that was the power of the cedar and the stone and the water, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's
because when the first birth occurs, those humans, when they first are out here, they're perfect. They brought the same frequency from where they were, and we never help them hold that frequency or that energy. And then they learn from the dysfunctional and the low functioning humans how it's easy to be dysfunctional and low functioning. And
Right.
if you go back into the lodge for the right reasons, you can reconnect to those frequencies, to those things that say, you know, this is the right way. You don't have to have anybody explain to you what's right and what's wrong. You already know. So just follow you that sense of energy that says that's the right thing to do. So you did a good job, and that's what they did. They learned and they felt and they came back and they reconnected to that way of living, the way we would hope the adults will help preserve or hold that with the ones that are just coming out and arriving here, and thanking them for coming here and saying, we've been waiting for you for a long time. And now you're here, and we're going to give you all the best we can. And you will follow this path because it's the right thing to do. And you'll know when to say that's not something I'm interested in. I'm interested in still trying to live in accordance to the way the original instructions were given to the creation, and to say, here we are, and we can share that.
Well, I mean, I was 30 years, I was an iron worker in New York City. And most of the guys that I worked with were Irish white Catholics, right? They were all in so we'd have these discussions at break and blah, blah, blah. And one guy, he asked me a question. I always had an answer. And there was a guy from Aguizosne, and he was a little older than me, but he said, you got all the answers. He says, ask Guayagero. So one guy says, when the hell are you Indians, they call us Indians, when the hell are you Indians going to catch up to the white man? I said, you want an answer? He said, yeah. I said, in order for us Indians to catch up to a white man, I said, we have to take 3 steps back. And you should have seen the look on their faces, and the 4-letter words, and everybody. And this guy from Zusne, he was laughing. He said, don't ask why you get a question, he'll answer you. And so let's go back to
When you said that, what came in? If someone said that to Mad Bear, he would say we would have to start dragging our knuckles again.
yeah, that's about the size of it, yeah. Well, it's funny because one guy who became my best friend, his name was John Reynolds, and he was an Irish Catholic. And in the end, he was so into the Haudenosaunee. I said, I'm not trying to convert you. I said, I'm just telling you. And then he did a lot of reading because he lived in New York State, and that's all our land. So he said, boy, a lot of that stuff you make sense. I says, well, it's you interrupted our tranquility.
Yeah.
And I said, some of us that managed to hold on to it. And then, like you said earlier when you came in, that if you talked like Mad Bear would talk to the Senecas and they say he's disrupting the waters, it's because they're comfortable in being half white and half native.
Yeah.
It's not comfortable to be native. It's a lonely road, the great law of peace, the great road of peace. I know that. There's not many people on that path. But I don't miss anybody, just my mother and some of the wise people that told me all this stuff,
Yeah. No, people would, after hearing Mad Bear like you speaking in the same way, when they would hear Mad Bear speak, they would ask him, what's your religion, or what do you follow? He said, we don't have a religion. He said, we have a way of life. And he said, in order to follow our teachings, you have to live it. You don't just read about it and practice it on the weekend or once in a while. He said, you have to live it every day. So if you're interested, those are the things that you have to begin. And he said, and it takes a long time for your essence, your heart and your mind to become in sync, or to come into that place where the rest of the creation recognizes that and said, aha, there's one of those people who understand us. Whether you're talking to the trees or the birds or any of the other elements in the creation, they understand and they recognize that you don't just put that on once in a while. You live that every day, every night before you go close your eyes, and every morning, the first time your eyes open, and you're grateful for this life. And I thank
Right.
whoever it is, and these are the words that I use. I said, whoever you were or are that created me, I say, Miigwech, Yahweh, thank you
Mhm.
for this life, because you're teaching me every day that if we're not grateful for the rain and the wind and all of the other elements that sustain this life, I said, then it will go away. So there's a few of us that still understand and know gratitude is the beginning part of being that understanding to say this is the life that is the most important part, is understanding and staying connected and not getting distracted by all of this other crazy stuff out there these days. And the kids, they're brain damaged now from technology. They have no idea of concept, even a basic thing of trying to, even if you ask them to make a fire, unless you give them a lighter or some gasoline or anything, they have no idea. And when you hear the things about giving gratitude or the Thanksgiving address of the things to say, be grateful when you're collecting even those little pieces of wood that you're going to use to start the fire. Thank that little pieces of wood for being there to help you build and continue on. But that's the gratitude. And even John was smudging me earlier. And as he's doing it, in my mind, I'm thanking the sage for
Right.
being here, for giving its energy and its existence to help me, because I'm human. Those plants don't need the help. They already know what they need to do. I'm being the human, I need their help. So I'm thanking that sage every time he fans the smoke on me,
Right.
and I'm thanking that sage for being here and doing what it does to help me. So it's little stuff like that, but then it expands and it continues to grow, and the layers get better and better when you understand and approach with the gratitude.
Well, when you mentioned sage, I live in the bush, and on my street, I'm the only one that doesn't cut my grass. I got nice green grass and every flower. You know how every season, every month, there's new flowers come up.
Yep,
Last week it was into the 80s and 90s for 3 days straight. Everybody cut their grass. I drive down the street and it's bone dry. Everything's all dried out and dead. And they ride by my house and I got like 6 inches of grass and everything's nice and green. There's all flowers.
yep,
And I just say, can't they see the forest for the trees? You know, but and
nope,
so I wrote in my post, I said, I'm not a lazy person. I said, I follow nature, you know, and I said, look how much of the ecosystem I'm destroying, the habitat of so many thousands of insects. So they're all here. You know, I have snakes in my yard and people are afraid of snakes. And I said, yeah, it's because you're religious. I said, any Oklahoma, native man, no person, not just man, but female, no, when you have snakes on your land means the ground is healthy. They won't live where it's contaminated, snakes.
no,
So they're, you know, that's again, that all comes from religion, you know. So I'm not
yeah.
afraid of
Right.
snakes.
No, and
human.
they clean up, they clean
Right.
up the things that you don't like the mice and the
Yeah.
moles and all the things that people don't care for. You go, well, that's what the snake eats. That's his food. And he can
That's the
get in
circle
those,
of life.
he can slide into those little crevices and he can
Yeah.
get them. Can't get in there. So leave them alone. That's what their job is. They're doing a good one.
All right.
Nobody else is talking.
All right. So I know Janet has to get going soon. Janet, do you want to jump in here? The question again is, what is the most profound experience you've had with spirit? So if you can explain your experience and define the context and how it changed your life, if you want. You don't have to, though. Totally up to you. I think you may be on mute. Oh, you're off.
Okay, so that's a very big question, or I should say the answer to it could be pretty long. I think that as a child, my awareness of spirit, for lack of a better word, was always known to me. And as an infant, coming out of infancy into my to the stage where, excuse me, to the stage where I started walking is when I think, I don't know what it was, but I'll just describe it. When I was learning how to walk, I always wanted to get out of the house. I grew up in a foster home up in the Bronx, in a very good neighborhood, lots of trees and backyards and clean. And so I remember being in the crib and there was a window in the bedroom that I had. It was a small bedroom. My mother always used it for the newborns, my foster mom. And there was trees. That was the one thing I loved about growing up. No matter what window I looked out of, in the front or the back of the house, you could always see trees. Not on the side because there was another house there, but I was fascinated by trees. But I felt there was something more in and I don't know how to say it in English. I wouldn't even know how to say it in my language, but it pushed me when I started learning how to walk to want to go out. And so at that walking stage, I tried to walk down the back stairs of the house. We had an inside set of stairs that led to the basement where the door was to get out into the front and the backyard. And I didn't make it all the way down. I fell down half a flight and my brother came, picked me up and brought me back into the apartment. It was a 2-story house, both like, you know, there was 2 apartments, 1 on each floor, but we had access to the whole thing because there was like 8 of us. So anyway, I'm going to try to shorten this. So that experience stayed with me, the trees and always wanting to go out. So then when I got older, I was sitting on my tricycle. I was about 4. I started school when I was 4 going on 5. So this was just before I went to school. And I'm sitting in the front backyard, which is all concrete. The backyard is dirt, and that's where the swings were and the monkey bars. So there's this fence that separates the front yard from the neighbor's front yard. And I'm riding my tricycle and all my brothers and sisters are in school. And my youngest brother, he was just too young. He was an infant. So anyway, I wanted to go to the neighbor's yard, you know, but the fence was blocking me. So I drive the tricycle up to the fence and I put my hand on the fence and it was like somebody was always there, you know, but I couldn't see who it was. But as an infant, that's when I noticed the trees and the way the leaves flickered and everything. It always seemed like there was something more, but I couldn't define it. So then I'm sitting on this tricycle. I'm about 4 years old. And so I said to whatever this presence was that I still can't see. I just know there's something else. I don't know, but it's there, you know? And I said, how come I can't go over there?